Are there any standout bacteria in the microbiome in people that get to 100 or older? Are there any like, whoa, these bacteria are like so high in these people, they've got to be doing something. And in fact, they found 4 of them.
Dr. William Li, what a treat to see you, man. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you've been such an influence on me and my personal health journey. You're in my new book, and you know I've been a big fan and read both your books. So it was Eat to Beat Disease, right, and Eat to Beat Your Diet. And I know that you're cooking up something new.
I got a bun in the oven
Yeah,
for my third book.
Yeah, well, we know what that gestation is like, and it's a creative time, but it's also can be a torturous time. So I wish you Godspeed there.
Thank you.
And you know, longevity is in the zeitgeist right now, right? So there's a lot of books, a lot of people talking about longevity. Certainly, this is not a new human interest. We've been in the pursuit of longer life for for millennia, really. But it's more in the public conversation than ever before. And you know, I certainly don't want you to divulge too much of what's in the book, but given that food is such a central part of what you think about and talk about. I'm curious about the relationship between food and specifically the gut and longevity and how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, well, so, you know, I come at everything from my own pillars, my own foundation, which is I'm a scientist. I study blood vessels, angiogenesis, blood vessels, how they grow, genesis, and I'm a doctor, internal medicine. So I think about the whole body, the whole person. And the other thing, you know, I learned about myself in this journey as an author and writing books for the public, and you know, like we can share a lot of the kind of like the Venn diagram of authors is pretty overlapping. Is, you know, we got a responsibility to be able to communicate information and to be able to discern like what's new to communicate, because you don't want to be writing the same old books that are out there. And what I think you just pointed out about the gut is such the tip of the iceberg that there's so much to communicate about what we're learning about the gut. It's impossible for anybody to really own that space. And so I dove into gut health as a cancer researcher because some years ago we became aware that if you had cancer and you were being treated with the state-of-the-art, most advanced cancer therapy, which is called immunotherapy. Immunotherapy is not chemo. It actually is the most natural therapy you can imagine. It's a medicine that you get that wakes up your own immune system and tells your immune system to go fetch and go destroy the tumor. All right? It's what your body does anyway, but this is a pharmaceutical that tells your body to do it a lot better and a lot more powerful. We discovered, and this is like 2017, 2018, that if you were in that situation with cancer being treated with this approach, that if you lacked a certain gut bacteria, you are unlikely to respond to the treatment. And if you had a certain bacteria, you were likely to respond, and not just likely to respond, you were likely to have a complete response, which means that your own immune system would figure out how to dry erase all the cancer away. So this is not like I don't want to have leaky gut. This is like a matter of life and death. And so that was what attracted me into start studying these different types of bacteria in my own way. I'm about discovery. I'm about observation. I'm about, you know, coming up with ideas, seeing what other people might not have seen before and putting ideas together, you know, with intuition. That's one of the, I think, the privileges of having a long and successful research career is that, you know, you learn how to appreciate those observations and come up with something new. Like, you know, Darwin was like, wait a minute, how come these birds have different beaks? You know?
Yeah.
And that's what you kind of build on.
Right. And if I remember correctly, this was also quite a kind of personal journey for you, because I think your mother had brain cancer. Is that right?
No, not brain cancer. My mother actually had endometrial cancer. So this is the
something
story.
else.
And by the way, my mother, I just had dinner with her the other night. She's doing completely well, but 10 years ago,
Wow.
all right, she was 80 and had endometrial cancer, which is a cancer of the lining of the uterus. She had surgery, but they didn't get everything. It spread everywhere in her body. She had stage 4. And at the age of 80, and she's like a frail, older Asian lady. And her oncologist basically took me aside and said, I don't think we should be treating her. Her body's not going to tolerate chemo. Why don't you take her on a cruise and enjoy some good time with her? And I looked at this guy like straight in the eye. And I'm like, do you know what I do for a living?
Right.
I eat this stuff for breakfast. Like I take the impossible and try to figure out how to make it possible. So we adjusted my mother's gut microbiome. We got her on immunotherapy. We sequenced her tumor. We did all the stuff that is possible now to do. Yeah. And we got her on immunotherapy, and with the right gut, gut microbiome, she became a complete responder, which means she never got chemo. She just got a touch of radiation, but she had 3 infusions only, 20 minutes apiece of an immunotherapy, 3 weeks apart. All right. So in 9 weeks, she went from stage 4 to stage 0, end stage to reversed all cancer.
Oh my God.
And then has taken a 10-year journey with no cancer. It's never come back. She doesn't see an oncologist anymore. Can't even remember she had cancer, to be honest with you, because it didn't make it. It didn't. I mean, that was how quick it was. It didn't make an impact on her life.
That's amazing. So you were treating with a immunotherapy pharmaceutical, essentially, but in conjunction with, were you using a prebiotic to feed certain bacteria, or were you supplementing with it? Yeah.
We pulled out all stops.
Yeah.
We use food as medicine.
Yeah.
We use food with that were prebiotic to be able to help feed her existing gut microbiome. We measured her gut microbiome to see if she had enough of the good stuff and realized that we could go further. We gave her probiotics to grow the good stuff. We removed harmful things from her diet that might impact on her gut microbiome. This is this is like landing a 747. Okay.
Yeah.
When the pilot is unconscious,
right.
There's no room for error. You got to do everything the right way. And we happen to do it. So, and I have to say, subsequently, I have seen so many people, like well over a dozen people, go from stage 4 to stage 0. I can tell you, I was invited to give a keynote in London earlier in the summer, and that was what I was invited to talk about, the transformation of cancer therapy. And we are now at a point where it is possible to go from stage 4 to stage 0. And the question is, what are we learning about that? How do you do it? And what are the clues of how to do it more often and better for people? And the gut microbiome keeps on coming up as a bullseye we got to hit.
Yeah. So interesting. I think kind of most famously, I believe it was President Carter got treated with Keytruda, right?
Yep, which is exactly what my mother got.
Okay. And that the specific bacteria that often gets referred to in conjunction with Keytruda was Akkermansia, if I remember correctly.
So we didn't know that in Carter's time.
Yeah.
But this is part of the research I was involved with. And, I have to say, I believe I'm the person, because that took this onto podcasting and social media. And now, of course, everybody knows about it. And there's actually a probiotic that's developed on it, which, by the way, I think it's a pretty decent product, because I've used it in cancer patients and measured it to really take a look at response and take. And, it's easy to kind of like get carried away with products, but right. Hey, you know what? It's out there, and that's phenomenal as an innovation. But Akkermansia is one of them. But Akkermansia is coming back again in a number of different contexts that I think your listeners will be fascinated by: weight loss, metabolic health, and longevity.
Okay, well, so you teased that. How would Akkermansia be involved in longevity? I mean, obviously, if it's helping to reverse cancer, that's a very direct way that it might be, but is it having kind of impacts on long-term metabolic health or staving off neurodegenerative disease? What's going on there?
Yeah, so let me frame it out. So first of all, as you pointed out very well, the quest for immortality, which is the same thing as longevity, okay, but longevity plus,
right?
Okay, it's been going on for thousands of years, and in fact, one of the things that I think it's helpful to reflect on is that this quest to find a single magic bullet or a single elixir, we still have that mindset. Like, what is the probiotic? What is the supplement? What is the thing?
Rapamycin.
Yeah, or whatever, you name it. Like it's, dealer's choice, right? For what we have. Wasn't found in the old days. So I like to talk about the story of the first emperor of China, okay, who sent out his top explorers to go all over the world to try to find an elixir for immortality for him, the emperor. Never found it, obviously, and so he knew he was going to die. So his way ultimately for creating immortality is to create the terracotta warriors, the 10,000 soldiers that were looking over his tomb that you can actually go visit now, and it's quite an amazing thing. And I think it's a testament to just like human ambition, and then of course, if you take a look at the Renaissance, they've paintings and sculptures of people who have been looking for the fountain of youth,
or mummification amongst the Egyptians.
And so listen, I mean, I think that what's different that we have in present day, I think came honestly to light when Google created Calico. Because all of a sudden you had investors in a big public company deciding we're going to actually create a company that's going to be trying to conquer death. All right. And so I think that was a frame shift, really, because now you actually are making it capitalist. You're making an enterprise. You're going to actually, reward investors for being able to find the prize. And, I don't have a comment on Calico or Google or anything like that, but I can tell you they're still at it, but to me, that marked a turning point in the quest for understanding aging and how to counter the harms of aging and then to study longevity. The other major kind of I think technological advance came from being able to study and characterize the gut microbiome, healthy gut bacteria, right? So look, you can't go anywhere today for anybody who's health conscious and not get them to acknowledge that good gut health is important for overall health, right? So dive a little bit deeper. What is good gut health? It has to do with our 39 trillion gut microbes that live in our gut, mostly in the lower third of the gut, in the colon, but actually also starting in the mouth, in the gums, and in our tongues, we start realizing, hey, the mouth is also the gut, and the gut microbiome also lives in the mouth. So, but, we wouldn't be able to know anything more specifically about that if we didn't have the ability to take a swab, go to the lab, identify the organisms or the populations of organisms, and come up with numbers and graphs and figures to say, just like a blood test, you can do a poop test and you can get some sense of what your microbiome is doing. Yeah. Okay. So this was the breakthrough that I think has allowed us to examine what is the role of the gut microbiome in longevity. And an amazing study that I'm really, really dumbfounded by, struck by, is applying this technology of looking at the gut microbiome across the adult lifespan, health span. And a group in Italy, in Bologna, actually looked at adults 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 90, 90 to 100, and older than 100, 100 to 114. Wow. So this is called superagers or super centenarians. The word centenarian is really referring to someone who's gotten to be 100, but you can actually get to more than 100. By the way, as a side note, do you know how many, first of all, do you know anybody who's lived to 100?
My grandmother lived to 104.
Awesome.
Yeah, and her mother lived to 101.
Wow.
But that's very, very rare.
Okay. Well,
particularly in my great grandmother's day, pretty rare. That's my guess.
First of all, that's very impressive. Good luck to you.
Thank
right?
you.
My great uncle lived to 104.
Okay.
As well. Okay.
Yeah.
So we both personally know people who have lived in our families to over 100.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I love what you said as a comment. You're like, that's pretty rare. So I'm going to throw this out to you. Do you know how many people today on this planet are 100 years old or older? Give me a number, not a percentage.
Just a guess.
Yeah. Take a wild guess of the number of people.
I'll say 20,000.
Okay. 722,000 people today are aged 100 or older.
Okay.
Huge amount of people. And this means, we live in a planet of 8 billion people, but this means that it is possible to live to 100, not as a onesie or a twosie, but in fact, there are larger and larger numbers overall, if you add them all up, that are getting there. And by the way, these people who are 100 today, they're probably not wearing an implantable glucose monitor. They're probably not, self-tracking. They're probably not getting a subscription. They're probably not getting a subscription to supplements. Yeah. And so what's really interesting is when technology and testing intersects with real life. And that's my approach to looking at longevity. So what's interesting about this study from Italy, I'm telling you, is that they looked at the gut microbiome of adults, and they're specifically saying, are there any standout bacteria in the microbiome in people that get to 100 or older? Are there any like, whoa, these bacteria are like so high in these people, like they've got to be doing something. Okay. And in fact, they found 4 of them.
Okay.
4 bacteria that are standouts in people that are super centenarians.
Particular strains.
Okay.
What are they?
All right. So there's one, and by the way, I didn't know these bacteria until I started to really dive into this. So
well, there's like on a good day, like 1,000 different species of bacteria, something like that.
Many more than that. Plus viruses, plus bacteria, plus archaea, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But the point is that, and again, like I hope anybody who's watching or listening to this understands we're at the tip of the iceberg. So this is not a conclusion. This is sort of like this is an appetizer of knowledge. This is not dessert. All right. And so what we know is these 4 bacteria stand out. I hadn't even heard about some of these before. One of them is called Odoribacter. Okay. Odoribacter. Okay. And what it does is that it actually boosts your immune system to fight certain bacteria. Now you think about it, like most elderly people, they die of infection. That's the most common exit for most people, I mean, you're like, oh, they fell, they broke their hip. Oh, they've got dementia. No, they got pneumonia. Right. Or they got they were overcome by the flu and they died. And so what's interesting is about this bacteria, another one's called Oscillobacter, like oscillation. Mm-hmm. Oscillobacter improves your lipid profile, lowers LDL, bad cholesterol, raises good cholesterol, manages your triglycerides, helps make insulin sensitivity so your glucose is a little bit better managed. Metabolic bacteria. Isn't that interesting in people that are super agers? Also have this standout bacteria that's really giving them a unfair advantage metabolically. Cool, right? That's an important clue. And then there's another one that is called Cristinacella bacteria, okay? Not as well known, but it improves brain health, improves vascular health, helps blood vessels get better. And again, these are not all that well studied, these bacteria, but I think it's time to start diving into these things to understand it. That's the 3rd one. And the 4th one is our old friend Akkermansia muciniphila. Wow. This bacteria that's helpful for anybody of any age who's got cancer actually is a standout in people who are super agers. Now, if you actually had metastatic cancer, you're not going to get to be a super ager for the most part. Yeah. Okay. And so again, it turns out that at the same time, more research has been done on Akkermansia, and it actually is a metabolic gatekeeper, helps you regulate glucose and insulin sensitivity better. Akkermansia also seems to be protective against brain brain disease, so it seems to support cognitive health, which is really important. And then with regard to metabolism, this might be some new information that I'm not sure if you had heard about this. Have you heard about P9? P as in Peter, 9?
No.
Okay. Sounds like a handgun, but it's not. P9 is actually a component. It's a particle on Akkermansia. So Akkermansia is a bacteria. Bacteria have shells, like a beetle. So P9 is a part of the shell. So here's how, and I'm going to tell you what P9 does in a second, but here's how it was discovered. Akkermansia is a bacteria. It's got to be alive in order to be able to have benefit. Well, what they did is in the lab, they figured out how to shatter Akkermansia into a million pieces. You usually use sound wave to do this. Basically, you beam an ultrasound at them and they just fragment into pieces. Guess what? Akkermansia still seems to have a lot of benefit for the metabolism, even if it's dead. So they were sifting through all the particles. This is like, crime scene investigation, NTSB, looking at all
bacterial
the things.
Forensics.
Bacterial forensics. And they found that the active part, the black box, seemed to be P9. So they looked at P9 and they said, what does P9 do on Akkermansia that helps with metabolism? Amazingly, P9 causes the gut, the body, to secrete its own GLP-1.
Wow.
It's jaw-dropping. GLP-1, of course, being the hormone that is the basis for the prescription weight loss drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy, and it's this big phenomenon that's going on in health with people chasing after it. And it's amazing that part of your gut microbiome does the same thing.
So this little bit, this bacterial wall segment or something of particle of Akkermansia essentially stimulates the endogenous production of glucagon, GLP-1. Yeah.
Correct.
That is crazy.
Isn't it amazing?
It is amazing. So let me ask you about the mechanism of action associated with these different strains of bacteria. Is it the bacteria themselves, or in this case, the P9 itself? Or is it the kind of postbiotics or the metabolites that are created by the bacteria, the famous ones being kind of short chain fatty acids, et cetera, that seem to be responsible for all of these different upregulations of various systems, immune health, metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, et cetera?
Great question. And in fact, that is one of the central questions is it the bacteria? Is it their products? Is it some other influence that they have on their neighboring bacteria or neighboring cells that's actually generating the benefit? You know what? I mean, this is really kind of like this is the
MacGyver shit.
The MacGyver. Well, I mean, but this is actually the centerpiece that scientists dive at. We don't know yet, and I think that this is the fun part. I mean, we've talked about this before when I was on your podcast. I mean, look, I'm a scientist, and most people think that scientists talk about all the stuff that they know all the time. Actually, a real scientist talks about what they don't know most of the time, and it's also really candid. And when they say they don't know, I don't know the answer to your question, but I will tell you that the short chain fatty acids made by many healthy gut bacteria, acetate, butyrate, propionate. Okay, these wind up drifting off made by the bacteria, drift off into the bloodstream and work everywhere else in the body. Pretty amazing to know. So we do believe that the short chain fatty acids, the postbiotics, are part of the benefits of these 4 bacteria that have been discovered. And again, this is still smoking hot research, so we're still thinking about it. But what's amazing is that if you take a look just at those 4, and undoubtedly there's many other factors and probably bacteria as well that still need to be discovered for super aging, but they all help with the things that we know are important. They help your health defenses. They help immunity, lowering inflammation. They help your metabolism. They help your blood supply, good circulation. Listen, they support and nurture all those aspects we know are important for health at any age. And sometimes we forget about how important those factors are as we get into our elderly age. We just kind of like drop them off like, I don't know, they're just old and weak. No, actually, this tells you that it's possible to get to those far reaches, the horizon, with that type of metabolic, anti-inflammatory, pro-vascular support that we actually need to. And, arguably, the best way to get to longevity is to avoid those diseases that'll take you out early.
Yeah. I think I don't know what the statistic is exactly, but I was shocked to read it that if you make it to 80, the chances that you'll make it to 90 are actually quite surprisingly high.
Yeah.
So, but I was looking at a image of the colon the other day. That's what I do in my spare time, right? And you see that so many of the systems of the body cluster right around it. I mean, you have just on the other side of that one cell thick layer, that epithelium, you have the bloodstream, so you have the circulatory system, you have the immune system is sitting right there, and then you have the nervous system. You have nerves right there that are sending, bidirectional messages up into your brain.
Yeah.
I mean, it does make sense that everything converges there. And so just there's every reason in the world to take care of it.
You ever see those pictures in Africa of the watering hole where all the different species come together?
Yeah.
And they get, they might not get along normally, but they all, when it comes to water, they all are figuring out how to interact with one another and make room for each other. And yeah, I mean, I think that the gut is one of those. And by the way, have you heard of the new organ we're considering an organ that's been discovered that's also all around the gut called the interstitium? Okay, this is like a new human organ.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, I got to tell you what it is based on something I learned in medical school. First year medical school, all right, you're a green stick, and so one of the first classes you take is anatomy. Of course, you got to learn all the body parts, and so you get, we have a cadaver, a donor cadaver, and you with your other students and with an instructor are taught how to actually do that dissection and literally appreciate every organ. Well, as you're pulling out the spleen and the liver and the guts and all that kind of stuff, you're left with an empty cavity. And when the cavity is empty, you're done. That's like the end of the course. Yeah. We were always tested, for exams. With the cadaver, like we had multiple tests, they'd have a part of the cadaver open. They would have these little tiny, like basically toothpicks with a little flag with a number on it. And the test would be, what is number 13? What is number 17? Identify it, right? So it's just testing how well you learn the terrain of the body. Well, I remember there was one time I saw a little stick that was like fallen off and lying on its side. And they said, what is this? And I thought, this must be a mistake from the people set up the test. Nope, there was an answer to it, and I got that question wrong, by the way.
Fair enough.
And the answer was, this is the interstitium. Interstitium is a term that we in medicine use to describe the space between organs, the negative space, the hollow space. Yeah, there's a little bit of liquid, a little bit of water that's in there or whatever, like things slip, slide around, the organs slide around. It's called the interstitium. Don't worry about it. Now we're beginning to realize that when you look at a cadaver, it's just air. It's like hollow. But in a living person, that space between organs, Mother Nature's very clever, doesn't want to waste any opportunity, has created the space between the organs as its own organ. And that actually there's chemical signals that are communicating from organ to organ, moving back and forth, sending signals from one end to the other, from the next organ to the other organ, all swimming, like scuba divers between organs. Wow. And that's the interstitium. And it's sending chemical signals. And after death, you don't see it anymore. But in life, it is vibrantly alive.
Crazy. So are these like hormone-like molecules or neuromod? I mean, what?
All the above. As far as we know, all the above. Like undiscovered country here.
Yeah.
And like that's what I love about my work in medical research is that I would have thought after when I graduated medical school, 4,000 years of medical knowledge shoved down our gullet, and we got to regurgitate it. And now it's just the the trade art of practicing medicine, like take a big breath and cough, all that kind of stuff. No. Like the reason I went into research is because of discovery. Yeah. And I'm so digging at the fact that we are still discovering new things about the human body that are mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's like taking a torch into the evening. What it reveals is the vast obsidian blackness of the night sky, essentially, like how much you don't know the more that you discover.
And this is really important, I think, when we look at these quests for longevity, quests to cure cancer, quests to, prevent metabolic disease. When you realize, for me anyway, when I realize how much there is still to be learned, I feel really optimistic, actually. And the optimism is really, I think, grounded in the fact that, once we figure this out, there's still more to be figured out. It's not like, we know everything there is to know and nothing's working. Like, I think that's where a lot of clinicians get frustrated. Medical doctors that have been, good people doing their craft over and over again. They encounter a disease that's unsolvable, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, Parkinson's disease, metastatic cancer, out of control diabetes, and they're like, stop. There's nothing else we can actually do. From my side of the fence, there's a lot that's going on. Like, we have got to keep pushing the boundaries of research for discovery.
So good. So I think you've well established how important the gut is and the various roles that it plays to enhance our longevity and our health span, candidly, because we're experiencing this distension of morbidity here in the United States and everywhere in the Western world, where the last 20 years of our life basically suck in many cases, which is, we're on these cocktails of pharmaceuticals for decades of, and they're really never addressing root cause. So what are some of the primary culprits, the inputs that degrade the health of the gut?
Well, I think that if you view the gut as an ecosystem, and I like to use the example of the Great Barrier Reef. And I don't know if you've ever been to Australia and had a chance to swim or dive around there, but
not yet. It's a dream.
I did it one year, and I'll tell you, it is so unbelievable. So took a boat out. Now, of course, unfortunately, a lot of the corals bleach, so you got to go way far out, like hours. But once you get in the water, from the surface, it just looks like the rest of the ocean. You go under the surface, and you are immediately immersed in this brilliant, vibrant, surround sound world with so much life, so much color, so much vibrancy that you can't believe you're there. And it's like the turtle floating around, the shark floating around, and the lobster floating around, and all these little mini fishes, and they're not fighting with each other, they're coexisting. And the reason I use the Great Barrier Reef as an example of how I think about the gut microbiome is that, just like the Great Barrier Reef, there's too many organisms to really account for, in one fell swoop. Like, you're just surrounded. And our gut is just packed with these bacteria. We've got to assume that they're making their own way, doing their own thing, figuring out how to coexist, and contributing to the overall health of the mass, right? So we don't know what happens if you kill one organism in the Great Barrier Reef, but probably it opens up room for something else bad to happen. Then you get a domino effect of badness, and you damage a reef, right? This is why we want to take care of our reef, and it's the same reason we want to take care of our gut microbiome. You don't want to knock it down that key pillar that was holding up the rest of the house.
Right. It's like a keystone species, like the wolves in Yellowstone, right? You extirpate the wolves, and it has this cascade downstream where all the flora and fauna suffer.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I think that, and by the way, I this is my approach to this. There's so many people coming into this space to study the gut microbiome. I'm sure there's many other really, really great perspectives. But my view is sort of thinking simply about the fact this is an ecosystem. We don't understand everything about it, but we are beginning to identify some of the players. We found the moray eel. We found Nemo the clownfish. We found the sea anemone that Nemo lives with. We know the blue lobster lives there. And so I think that, and we also know some of the more threatening things too. We know some of the bad guys that are that are lurking around there as well. And and I'm not talking about like fishing trawlers. I guess that's a bad guy. As well. You can damage. So we're beginning to realize what's going on. We're beginning to realize enough to dive in there. What are some of the things that can damage your gut microbiome? Well, I think that we do know that too much sugar can damage your gut microbiome, just like it damages your metabolism. It's overwhelming, and it can be damaging. I think we know that too much red meat, like a super carnivore type of diet, for a long period of time can alter the bacteria in a pretty dramatic way. That's not to say you shouldn't have any meat. It's just saying that like a super meat heavy diet all the time can alter the microbiome. We know that emulsifiers, thickeners in foods, okay. Do you eat yogurt? Yeah. Okay. Do you get low fat or regular yogurt?
Actually, I've been on the non-fat yogurt kick, and that's a separate. I can tell you why. It's just because I'm trying to get bolus of protein without too many calories from fat.
Got it. Now, because you're a very, very thoughtful person, you've probably chosen a low-fat yogurt that, in the ingredient label, doesn't contain a lot of emulsifiers.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but a lot of low-fat yogurts, when you pull out the fat, it collapses into a thick puddle. Okay, that's not very appealing. And so, some of those products, the manufacturers add emulsifiers, carrageenan, polysorbate 80, you name it, to thicken it back up to give you the mouthfeel of whole yogurt. And the whole purpose of actually getting low-fat yogurt is not to impact your lipids, right? You don't want whole fat, saturated fat. It turns out that kind of low-fat yogurt, your cholesterol doesn't go down, it goes up. And the reason it goes up is because you damage your gut microbiome with these emulsifiers, these additives that damage the gut microbiome. And because the gut microbiome helps to control your lipid metabolism, you've actually screwed up, right idea, wrong solution.
Right. It's incredible that we've outsourced so much function to a non-human cell inside of our own body. It's really just quite amazing. The interconnectedness of it. There's almost something quasi-spiritual to the idea.
Well, it's interesting because it gives us a better appreciation of what it takes for us to have equilibrium and homeostasis and peace within ourselves. I mean, if you really think about it, like, okay, this has happened to all of us, right? You wake up in the morning and you're basically doing okay. At some point later in the day, you're like, your gut's crampy and gassy and you're just not that comfortable, and go to the bathroom every now and then or whatever. Listen, that's our gut microbiome crying out for help. They're sending out distress signals. Right. Okay. The signal flares are going off. Like something's going on there that isn't good. They need some help from us. And so this is like, I think everybody's can relate to that aspect, and it just shows you how important and how interconnected who we are and how we feel with our gut is. And by the way, when you've got that crampy gut kind of discomfort, it's hard to be in a good mood.
Yeah.
Right? You're kind of irritated. You're like short-tempered.
Yeah. Not going to make great decisions.
Impatience, not going to make great decisions. Yeah. And you think it's just because, I don't feel that great. But actually, our gut bacteria, through the nerves that you just mentioned that are distributed throughout our and wrapping around our intestines, it's our bacteria not sending the right signals to our brain. That gut-brain axis is messed with in some way that's dysfunctional, so our brain's not working well either. So again, it's sort of our sense of self, our sense of identity, our own brand, okay, is very, very connected to our gut bacteria, our gut health.
Yeah, and some of those key neurotransmitters that enhance mood and that are important for mood regulation seem to be at least either made in the gut or stimulated by certain bacteria than to make them in other parts of the body.
I worked on this as well. There's one bacteria called Lactobacillus reuteri,
Right.
L. reuteri, that is a healthy gut bacteria. Before the antibiotic revolution in the 1930s, it was pretty much in everybody's gut. And then since then, it's been etsy-ketsy. Sometimes it's present, sometimes it's not present, but it used to be present everywhere. And now that more research has been done on what the role of Lactobacillus reuteri is, among many things it does. Healing, lowering inflammation, improving immunity, lowering the growth, like suppressing the growth of colon tumors and breast tumors. One of the amazing things it does is it is very clearly been shown in research studies that it text messages your brain, this bacteria in the gut text messages our brain to release oxytocin. Mm-hmm. Oxytocin being one of those brain hormones. It's a social hormone that is absolutely critical for the pleasure that we feel in the right social circumstances and physiological circumstances. So you go to the airport to pick up a friend or a relative you haven't seen for a while. They walk through customs. They come out the gate. Well, you run up to them and you give them a big hug and you just feel great. So good to see you, right? And your brain's sending that signal. That's oxytocin.
Yeah.
Oxytocin is the signal your brain releases when you have a kiss. I'm not talking about like a peck on the cheek. I'm talking about a good, passionate French kiss. Mm-hmm. Boom, it comes right out. And oxytocin is what your brain shoots out like 10,000-fold for a short few seconds when you have an orgasm as well. So little bacteria actually is in charge of doing some of this stuff. I mean, it's not the only thing, but it actually has this role for social hormone. And as it relates to food, it's really, really interesting that some yogurts have Lactobacillus reuteri, that sourdough bread, before we off camera, you were talking about like making sourdough bread. Yeah. And you have an ancient starter.
We have an ancient starter from my wife's mom. I mean, not ancient. I wouldn't want to call her ancient on camera, but it's been around a couple of decades now.
It's like a legacy starter.
Yes.
An ancestral starter. The Lactobacillus reuteri is what gives sourdough bread the tanginess of it. And can you guess there's a cheese that's made with Lactobacillus reuteri? Which cheese? Popular
I'm guessing
cheese.
like an aged dried cheese is what I'm guessing, like a Gouda or a Parmesan or something like that.
It's Parmigiano Reggiano.
Yeah.
The original types, those gigantic big wheels that you find, the like orange wheels. That's a starter bacteria.
Amazing.
So you can actually get a little bit of Lactobacillus reuteri from your foods. Now, I'm not telling people to eat a ton of cheese, got lots of salt and saturated fats. I'm not telling people to eat a ton of sourdough bread, but a little bread, like not so bad for you. And again, this is sort of just trying to bring, I think, a more reasonable approach to food where it's so easy to go to extremes with foods. You got the devil, you got the angel. It's like a religion fighting, two religions fighting each other. Right. I sort of try to take a little bit more of a reasonableness approach to say, you know what, our research is discovering that there are some healthy properties in some of the foods that we like.
Yeah. So we have these beneficial bacteria like Lactobacillus reuteri or Lactobacillus bulgaricus is one that I'm familiar with. Other bifidobacterium, etc., Akkermansia. What do we want to feed these bacteria such that they are efficient and friendly?
I think that the common conclusion that all the researchers have agreed on is that these bacteria love to eat polyphenols. So polyphenols coming from colorful foods. So eat the rainbow and you get all the different polyphenols that are coming out. That's actually really beneficial. And these bacteria also love another prebiotic, which is dietary fiber. Mm-hmm. And dietary fiber is also present in mostly plant-based foods. Yet another reason why eating a plant-forward, plant-based diet is going to be healthy for you is that you're also feeding those 39 trillion bacteria in your body the food that they actually need. And I always talk about, like feeding your bacteria like it's kind of our responsibility, and you can't unhear what you're hearing now, right? So if you know that your gut bacteria is important for your health, and you know that it's inside your body, and you know you got to feed it, think about it. If you have a pet, if you got a cat, a dog, a bird, a goldfish, it's your responsibility to feed it every day. You got to feed your pet, and we have to feed our gut bacteria. And just like a pet, come on, most of us want to do good by our pets, so you want to feed them quality food. Same deal with our gut bacteria. You want to actually feed them good quality food as opposed to bad quality food.
Right. When you take care of your tenants, they will pay the rent. Right.
That's a good one. I like that.
So we actually have some food in front of us, and for those who are just listening, I encourage you to watch the video too. But for example, so there's a pomegranate right here. I harvested this from our property in Topanga. It's kind of right at the end of pomegranate season right now. So that's a colorful fruit, but there's also some pretty powerful polyphenols in there. What would you have to say about pomegranate?
Yeah. Can I pick it up?
Please.
All right. So first of all, a pomegranate is about the size of an apple. Like they come bigger. They're red like an apple. They've got this little kind of king's crown at the top of it. So for those of you who are listening, I'm describing what I'm holding in my hand. It's a little heavier than an apple. And the reason it's heavier is because it's packed with seeds, these tiny little ruby red seeds that are like crunchy in the middle. And there's like a little skin around it and like juice that's injected just inside that skin. So you can imagine, and I think most people have seen pomegranate seeds. You can sprinkle them in salads. There's a lot of Middle Eastern dishes that are made with pomegranate seeds. And of course, you can have the juice. Now, that juice of pomegranate is loaded with bioactives, including one called elagitannins. And elagitannins, by the way, do good things for us, like most plant-based bioactives. In this case, in the context of our gut bacteria, we know that the pomegranate bioactive, the polyphenol, also called the elagitannins, when you eat them, they stimulate our gut to secrete mucus. Now, people go, oh, it's disgusting, mucus. No. You want gut mucus.
Yeah.
Think about it. What's mucus? It's slippery and slimy. Well, that's actually how our poop is able to move down our colon to get out. And if you've ever been constipated, or dehydrated, and you get constipated, that without being able to have without a slippery, slidey way to get out, like you are stuck, and it's not comfortable. And so that's normal mucus, and the pomegranate juice and seeds, okay, but it's really the polyphenols in the juice actually make your gut make more of that healthy mucus. Now, Akkermansia is one of those healthy gut bacteria that actually loves to eat mucus. It eats mucus. That's part of its food. In fact, the mucus is part of its name. So Akkermansia is the first name, the genus. The species is called Muciniphila.
I never put that together.
Mucusphilia, mucus-loving Akkermansia. All right.
There you go.
So that's what it is. And so by eating pomegranates or drinking pomegranate juice, you wind up secreting more mucus, healthy mucus, and the Akkermansia will naturally grow. It's a fertilizer for Akkermansia. So that's actually one of the benefits of eating pomegranate. And again, just to circle back to a little bit what we said before, man, Akkermansia, it's present as a standout in people who get to be super agers, and it improves your immune system and it improves your metabolism. And it's got this little P9 thing that causes your gut to make its own GLP-1. I mean, like, what's not to like about all this stuff?
Yeah.
Besides the fact that if you can't remember anything else, pomegranates they taste great.
They're great. Yeah, they're very enjoyable. There's also this compound that I think certain people have this bacteria, not everybody, that actually takes the elagitannins, and there's a bacteria that essentially uses the elagitannin and metabolizes it into this compound called urolithin A, which has gotten to be popular as a supplement, but many people who have that bacteria actually don't need it. And studies seem to suggest that particular compound is very useful for kind of mitophagy, essentially like kind of breaking down dysfunctional mitochondria and helping with mitochondrial function. So
yeah. And in fact, it's one of the few supplements where I've seen pretty convincing human evidence that it actually works in the way that it's supposed to work, or the way that people talk about it working. For people who are not familiar with the topic, I mean, mitochondria are the little powerhouses, the little energy, the little nuclear power batteries in our cells, and we need them to have energy. In fact, without mitochondria, we wouldn't make it 1 second. All right, like we'd be instantly like keel over. So thank goodness for mitochondria. And as we age, mitochondria kind of slow down. We get fewer of them. They're not as powerful. It's kind of like an old AAA battery, and in your voice recorder, whatever you use batteries for, the light dims. And so, so one of the interesting efforts to really support health and health span is to give you more energy by helping to support and produce more mitochondria. And this is where this urolithin idea comes in. Could we actually power up our cells, and in the interest of having longer, more energetic lifespan, be able to help that way? And that's really the origin. So I think it's important just like explain. When you mention supplement, all of a sudden some people blank out, some people get excited.
Right.
I think there's some real science behind it as well. I don't take it myself, but it's not like, and it's not that I'm endorsing it or not endorsing. I think it's a really valid thing. And pomegranate naturally is one of those effector foods that actually can play a role in delivering that. So yeah, exactly. I mean, this is how things kind of interconnect, these mechanisms of health.
Yeah. So cool. So we have some other foods here. We might not get to everything, but a natural bridge would be to some walnuts. And, we've been eating nuts as a species for a very, very long time. So we evolved in relationship to them. So I assume that we have some adaptive mechanisms for receiving some of the macronutrients and micronutrients and phytochemicals that are in nuts. Walnuts, I also believe, also do have a polyphenol. I think they also have ellagitannins in them. But what would you say just about walnuts? And I think there's some pistachios in there. What's your general feeling about those?
I'm picking up this jar. It's a pretty heavy jar.
Yep.
Mason jar. It looks like it's got pistachios, walnuts.
And it's a little bit of cacao nibs in there.
Oh yeah. Okay. This is this is like mostly nut trail mix. But look, I mean, tree nuts are quite amazing for health. Great source of protein. So people who are, especially people who are vegetarian or vegan, I mean, like nuts are a great way of actually getting your protein in. It's got good fat, healthy fat, called monounsaturated fatty acids, which actually help to overall right size your lipids. Like it helps to lower HDL, harmful cholesterol, and it's loaded with dietary fiber. As anybody who's crunched a nut knows, it's fibery. A great snack, a really great snack. By the way, I love to eat tree nuts, and what I do is I buy the nuts from the best places I can. I don't have them pre-packaged or pre-seasoned with that barbecue nuclear powered stuff or a spice. Like who knows what's in that stuff. I like to buy them plain.
Yeah. And
I either eat them plain or I will toast them lightly in a stainless steel pan or a cast iron pan. You put it on like low medium, okay, and you heat the pan and you just put some of the nuts in there and just shake the pan.
And don't forget about them.
And
it's so easy to forget about them.
Don't check your email. Don't listen to a podcast. Like focus on as they say, focus on your nuts.
Yeah, that's always good.
Don't burn your nuts.
Don't burn your nuts.
Because actually, if you don't do that, they'll very quickly. What I tell people, like the little practical trick is. They'll get to a certain point where the aroma of a toasted tree nut is amazing.
Yeah.
So take it off the heat right away. Take it out of the pan right away.
I think you need a Dr. Lee "Don't Burn Your Nuts" apron. So maybe I'll get one of those for your birthday.
Don't burn your nuts meme.
Yeah, totally. And then sometimes I will put a little sea salt or something on them. For a little
sea salt is great. Other spices that you might not otherwise find use for, like not everybody cooks Indian food, but that turmeric's good for you, and cardamom's good for you. Mm-hmm. These are spices that are often used in Indian cuisine, but you don't have to make a curry. You can actually, go to the spice cabinet and find some herbs and spices that you might not have actually used before, and you can season up your own toasted mix of tree nuts to make a tasty snack.
Yeah, they're really great. I also have them around to cadence my consumption of food well because of the fiber content,
which gives you which activates your satiety centers in your brain, so you kind of feel full. So if you snack on some tree nuts, okay, you're less likely to overeat at your next meal. Same deal with beans too. Same thing. If you have beans, like for lunch, you're less likely to overeat at dinner.
Yeah, increases satiety. For me, who had struggled with blood glucose issues and blood glucose management, just the fiber intake prior to eating other foods has been really effective for me, because fiber will kind of break down and create this kind of lattice gel in your small intestine and slow the absorption of glucose. But then also your gut bugs love it too. So every reason for that. What about, I can smell this actually. And this is our sauerkraut. So we make that at home here in a crock. It's so easy. It's just really cabbage and salt and water. That's it. But it's actually quite unique because this is a prebiotic, a probiotic, and a postbiotic in one jar on some level. So
I love that you brought that. So for people who are listening, I'm holding another mason jar. It's got sauerkraut in it. It's a little bit more than half full. Sauerkraut's, as Jeff, you just said, it's chopped up cabbage, like basic cabbage. You squeeze out some of the water, and then you add some more water and salt in it, and then you let it go. And what's interesting about fermentation, which is a 1,000-year-old art, practiced in almost every culture, is that it takes fresh food and it turns it into something else, and it makes it last a lot longer, and it gives you different health benefits as well. All right, so take something good for you and make it even better later on. Yeah. All right, and so I think that's an important perspective to have on sauerkraut, because some people go, I'm not going to eat a hot dog. Why do I want sauerkraut? Well, sauerkraut is actually a incredibly great way to get a brassica like cabbage into your system, and it's got a very, very distinctive flavor profile. It's got a little acidity, So if you want to play around with what's on your plate and please your palate, like, it's something I encourage people to try. No matter what your experience was as a kid, try it as an adult. Know that it's got the bioactives and the polyphenols from cabbage itself, like the isothiocyanates and the sulforaphanes and glucophorins, that's good stuff. And by the way, because it's cut up, you've already released the myrosinase with the enzyme in the cells that actually help to convert the sulfur-containing bioactives into more products that are good for you. So just making sauerkraut by chopping it up actually does something. And then, when you let this thing ferment, expose it, like bacteria that are present in the room and the air around us settle on, and you're like, well, how come it doesn't, turn into a toxic, dangerous mess? It's because we've learned as humans over the centuries that when you follow the directions of creating certain fermented foods like sauerkraut, what happens is that any bad bugs get out-competed by the good bugs, and the good bugs wind up going in there and starting to create oxidation and fermentation and gas and alcohols, and you wind up actually getting this incredible result, which is the sauerkraut in this case, or the kimchi, which is another way of actually doing. Or in China they do pao cai, which is like another pickled. It's a Chinese version of sauerkraut. By the way, did you know that sauerkraut originally came from China?
No, really?
Long before it went to Eastern Europe and Germany.
Yeah, Germany.
Yeah. It actually came from China because the traders on Camelback they wanted to bring cabbage over, but they couldn't. It obviously wouldn't last for a long time. So they started to figure out ways early on along that dusty desert trail for fermentation, and that was really the origin story of sauerkraut.
So
of course,
interesting.
Once it got to Europe, it became an art and a craft all by itself of fermentation and creating like what we now see as a very German type of condiment, let's call it. But absolutely delicious. So yeah, great for gut microbiome. So it's got the prebiotics, the polyphenols, and the dietary fiber from the cabbage. And then because it's fermented by bacteria, healthy bacteria that wind up out-competing and becoming dominant in your bacteria. Now you're eating it. Now it's a probiotic. It's like Mother Nature's probiotic. It doesn't come in a capsule. You don't have to subscribe to it every month. All right. You can put it on your plate and you can enjoy it. And then because these bacteria have been doing their thing in the fermentation vat from which sauerkraut is made, they release their short chain fatty acids. So you get the postbiotic as well. So, it's the pre, pro, and postbiotics all in one. That's like a big upside for sauerkraut.
Yeah, it's a trifecta. And it's good on so many things other than hot dogs, candidly. I eat it on eggs. I'll eat it on other kinds of regeneratively grown meats, etc. Or I'll just have like a bunch on the side of my plate.
Yeah,
and my kids love it too. So it's great. So kind of flipping over here to another jar, this is, you referenced this before. So these are some seed crackers that my wife Skylar makes. And, the base is this kind of legacy sourdough starter. So there's this kind of a similar process going on here with lactic acid fermentation. And I was actually thinking about this the other day. I'll ask you just kind of as a sidebar for a second. There is an analogy here between what happens with sauerkraut and a sourdough starter with what's happening in our mitochondria. So if you look at glycolysis, the sort of first stage of cellular respiration, that is a fermentation process, really the byproduct of that is a little bit of ATP, but of lactic acid. And that's what's also going on here. And of course, our mitochondria 2 billion years ago was the product of like two bacteria or an archaea trying to engulf another bacteria. So there's something kind of interesting going on right there. But in any case, my wife takes the sourdough starter and then adds a bunch of different kinds of seeds, chia and flax, particularly, and makes these kind of seed crackers. There's like really good protein in there. Again, good fiber. But I know you haven't tried these because these are a little bit more bespoke or esoteric. But I think you could probably speak to it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, actually, could I try a small piece of one?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah.
I don't want a giant one. Just like give me break off a little end.
Sure.
All right. Great. I love the fact that we've got demos because I think it's so much more meaningful, for people listening or watching, to know that, I'm holding this thing in my hand. It's kind of like a flat piece of chocolate, but it's all seeds, all packed together. And you said it's got some sourdough.
Starter is kind of the base, and then the chia is kind of the binder.
Crunchy.
Yeah.
And what's the binder?
The chia actually does the binding.
I'm going to tell you.
It's pretty good.
This is a really great cracker. Kudos to Skylar for making it.
Yeah.
I'd love to get the recipe.
Sure.
I'll tell you, the sourdough aspect of it is what makes it like a sophisticated cracker for like a cheese board.
Totally.
And what I love about it is it's very diverse.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it's got a lot of different kinds of things in it. You got a little bit of salt in there. Any other spices or?
Yeah, there are some other spices. I can't name them, but there are. She kind of explores
pepper,
the spice drawer.
Some other things.
Yeah.
Anyway, like this, I'm holding this piece in my hand. I'm crunching it at the end of it. It's really delicious, and it goes to show you that things that are good for you can be like really extraordinarily delicious. Like I would take a box of this.
Yeah.
Home with me.
I'll send you home with some.
All right. I would love it.
Brought it to, I was with Rich Roll. Do you know Rich?
Mm-hmm.
So his wife, Julie, makes a vegan cheese called Shrimu, which is like the best vegan cheese I've ever tasted in my life. And these crackers are the perfect accompaniment to those anyhow. So.
Right. Okay. Chia seeds. Yeah. Great source of the plant world's version of omega-3s. Actually, it's a precursor. ALA, aminolevulinic acid. When we eat that, our bodies convert that ALA, amino levulinic acid from chia seeds, into omega-3s. So it's kind of like having the precursor to the supplement you might actually have. You got to eat a lot to actually get adequate amounts of omega-3s. But listen, every little bit counts, and there's fiber in here as well. And I love the taste of it. I love the idea of taking good whole ingredients and finding some recipe to make it into something more. And by the way, so I sometimes speak to people who ask me, well, should we get rid of all processed foods? And what I try to do is to say, let's try to define processed versus not processed, because by taking the raw whole ingredients like the chia seeds and the sourdough starter and putting them together and baking them, I suppose, or together to create this incredibly delicious cracker, okay, you've made a process. You've processed it. That's not ultra processed, but it's processed. Now, if you license this recipe to the companies that makes potato chips, and they made this, and you found it in every airport. Okay, I'm thinking I can see the gears turning in your head. Well, maybe I should do that. But what I'm saying is that, you could easily ultra process by having a big machine in a factory extrude this stuff and then package it and then start adding their own ingredients and preservatives. That's ultra processed. So let's define processed versus ultra processed, because the processed food, which is what I'm holding in my hand here and crunching on, absolutely delicious and absolutely healthy as well. So I'm just saying that to make sure we're distinguishing processed versus ultra processed.
100%. Cool. All right, moving on. So we have a mutual friend, a guy named Doug Evans. He's a sprout king. He sends me these kind of sprouting kits, but you certainly don't need a kit. You just really need a mason jar, of which obviously I have plenty, and some cheesecloth and a rubber band and some seeds. And you soak those seeds, and then really for maybe 3 or 4 hours, and then you kind of dry them out, and then you kind of rinse these seeds twice a day. And in about a week, 5 to 7 days, you get broccoli sprouts. So these are sprouts that are made from little tiny organic broccoli seeds. And we have quite a ample bowl of them here.
So I'm looking at a glass bowl that it's kind of thing that you put leftovers in, but it is packed to the gills with these little tiny broccoli sprouts piled on top of each other. So if you haven't seen a broccoli sprout, they are, let's see how we describe it. They're like an inch maybe. They are white colored, like the long part is white, and then they have a little seed at the end of it, little brown seed, and a little green leaf on the other end. So just like you might think about a seed that sprouts with a little green leaf at the very end. Ultimately, if you put that in the ground, or it would actually turn into a whole broccoli. And it's amazing to me, just looking at this little pile of broccoli sprouts that you brought out, to think about those little guys turning into a big, thick broccoli with a gigantic stem and the treetops, the florets. Which is like it is almost like a fantasy plant, what broccoli actually looks like. If you look at the whole broccoli plant you'd buy it from a farmer's market. We usually see just the florets, right? Cut down the florets. But it turns out that adult broccoli and all broccoli contains, these sulforaphanes, these isothiocyanates that are incredible. They lower inflammation. They cut off the blood supply to cancer. They activate your metabolism by triggering thermogenesis with your brown fat. So they can actually literally flick the switch to your brown fat, which then lights up mitochondria, lots of mitochondria. By the way, do you know why brown fat is brown?
I think because of the iron content in the mitochondria.
Exactly. So in order to be able to create heat, like for thermogenesis, brown fat are packed with mitochondria. All right. And because mitochondria have iron in them, and iron gets oxidized as a normal cellular process. If you took a bunch of iron nails and stuck them out on the porch, they turn brown. So that's why brown fat is brown. But when you trigger that, you'll actually get heat generated. And to generate that heat requires energy. And what brown fat does is draw the fuel away from your harmful excess white fat, like your visceral fat. So good fat fights bad fat. Brown fat burns down white fat. And sulforaphanes from broccoli can actually do that. The other thing that that sulforaphanes can do is actually trigger your immune system, ramp up your immune system for greater immune strength. We just talked about metabolism, but you can actually do it with immunity. It also helps with immunity. In fact, there was a study done at the University of North Carolina where they were taking young, healthy college students, and it was in the fall, so they were getting flu shots, and they recruited subjects out of that population of people getting flu shots, and they divided up their group so that half of them wound up, in addition to the flu shot or the flu vaccine, they wound up getting a tall cup of a broccoli sprout shake. And they drew blood at the beginning, they drew blood at the end, they did nasal swabs to look at flu virus and everything else. And, one of the things that getting the flu vaccine, and the other group, by the way, just got a placebo shake. All right. So one of the ways that you tell the flu virus is working is, there's viruses everywhere. You swab your nose, you can detect it if you look for it. But also you can look at your immune cells. Vaccines work by triggering your T cells, which are a part of your immune system, to be trained to go after the flu virus. And so you should have more of those trained super soldiers, these T cells after you get a vaccine. Okay. So what they did is they actually drew the blood. Half the group got broccoli sprout shake. The other half got a placebo. Everybody got the flu vaccine. And technically it wasn't the flu shot. They had a nasal spray for flu. Okay. So that's another way of getting the flu vaccine up the nose. And what they found in the kids, the young people who actually got the broccoli sprout shake, that it ramped up the desired immune response to the flu vaccine by 22 times.
Wow.
Broccoli sprout shake.
22 times?
22 times.
That's a kind of statistic you almost never hear, like 22 times.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And so this is the power of food as medicine.
That is amazing.
I mean, if you don't look for it, you'll miss it. And once you look for it, if you use modern scientific techniques, I mean, this is when I do food as medicine research, I use the same tools that we would for drug development and apply it right. I put food into it instead. So, for example, like if you were developing a new vaccine for flu or whatever, you would do the same kind of experiment. You would just measure the T cell response. Yeah. So in this case, it was just that they added the broccoli sprout shake, and that was the only other variable.
That is so interesting. My God. I mean, I've heard you say this before, but that, our cells that are sensitive to the outside world, right? And they have receptors on them. And those receptors evolved in relationship to food, to the signals provided by food, not the signals provided by drugs. And I'm certainly not trying to vilify good pharmacology, but over hundreds of thousands of years of Homo sapien development and then millions of years of hominid development prior to that, we co-evolved with food such that these receptors are sensitive to certain kinds of bioactive compounds like sulforaphane, et cetera. And it's just a kind of a framing that not everybody is thinking about.
Yeah, because it's not like we don't treat foods like dietary supplements or drugs.
Right.
Foods are part of our own human ecosystem that we've coexisted with, and we inherently know, and our bodies know exactly what to do with the stuff that's more natural. By the way, have you seen the research that has been coming out? It's been trickling out over the last couple of years. Researchers who are studying chimpanzees and apes are discovering that when they are injured or wounded, they will specifically go forage for specific leaves of specific plants, and they will chew them up, okay? And then they will rub the plant on their wound to heal it.
Wow.
So again, we're not that original.
Okay, so we're at our last little sample here, and this is just a sort of thin little canister. And this, of course, is green tea.
Ah.
So you can smell it if you like.
Actually, so let me just describe what I'm holding. I'm holding a round tin with the lids off, and inside it are these little tiny dried, curled tea leaves. And what I do when I have able to take a look at tea, and this is actually the way tea connoisseurs or tea dealers actually do it. You bring it up to your nose, you smell it, and you can smell the fragrance. You can smell the fragrance of this.
Try it.
It's actually speaking of the receptors and the interactions that we have with our food, and what you've actually handed me is like a beautiful example of very delicate tea leaves. This is Camellia sinensis, is the species, genus and species of the tree that produces tea leaves. These are picked. Tea grows in tropical environments. They are picked at certain seasons. If you pick tea leaves early in the season, like in the spring, the caffeine levels are actually very, very low. Mm-hmm. And the reason the caffeine levels are low in early spring, so if you're sensitive to caffeine but you still want tea, get spring picked tea, or sometimes they call it white tea. Huh. The reason is caffeine made by the tea plant is a natural pesticide. Uh-huh. So when and later in the summer, when you get that second crop of tea leaves being picked, now in the tropical environment, you got a lot of bugs buzzing around the tea. Now it really needs to repel those critters, so it makes a lot of caffeine. All right.
So interesting.
And so that's another interest. So it's kinder, gentler tea in the spring pick later. And now here's the thing about tea. You've handed me a tin with loose leaf tea, which is the kind of tea I personally drink. Mm-hmm. Most people, though, drink tea in a tea bag. Yeah. And if you're going to drink tea in a tea bag, you'll get polyphenols from the tea, the catechins from the tea. But a lot of people don't realize that how you steep the tea with a tea bag matters. You want to dunk the tea bag. Okay, and you want to dunk it up and down, because otherwise, just by passive diffusion, you're not going to get all the polyphenols. By dunking it, you're actually forcing the weight of the tea shaking around in the water to squeeze out more of the polyphenols. So if you're brewing tea with brewing tea in a tea bag, you want to actually really keep dunking it and to get as many polyphenols as you can out. Now,
pretend you're Michael Jordan. Keep dunking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you the caveat that I actually have today, and it justifies why I've always liked loose leaf tea, is we're beginning to realize that many of the tea bags aren't just made out of paper, but in fact they're sprayed with plastic on the outside to prevent them from ripping. Yeah. And when you dunk a tea bag to make tea, one study showed up to 1 billion microplastic particles and nanoplastics can come into the cup of tea that you're drinking. Yeah. 1 billion. So that's not what you want to do.
No. So and I find it to be much more gratifying to make tea from loose leaf tea.
Yeah. So here's what you do: loose leaf tea, put it in a tea ball, metal tea ball, and that way you don't have to have the tea. Or if you do it Asian style, Asians would just take up a little a little clump of tea leaves, put them into a cup, pour hot water on it. Okay. Yeah. You can get fancier, obviously. You can do ceremonial tea and stuff like that. But literally, put hot water in it and don't drink it right away, because the temperature has to go to a sub-boiling temperature for maximal extraction of the flavor as well as the polyphenols. But then once the leaves take up the water, they're hygroscopic because they're dry. They'll actually settle down to the bottom, and you just drink the tea off the top.
Yeah.
That's basically how I do it. And you can actually refill the water 2 or 3 times, and you'll get more polyphenols out of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, but when you have loose leaf tea like that, one of the things that you get the polyphenols, but what you don't get the most out of, now again, we're talking about gradations of getting benefits, right? Tea bags, you get a little bit of you get some polyphenols, you got to really dunk it to get more polyphenols. Loose leaf tea, you get a lot of more polyphenols because now it's just not held up in a bag. It's all just drifting around. All the polyphenols come out. But if you want really max benefit, all the polyphenols, plus the dietary fiber from the tea leaf. It's a plant. It's a plant leaf. Okay, you want to get matcha.
Yeah.
Matcha is basically similar to these dried tea leaves, but they pulverize them into a powder. Now you get the dietary fiber from the leaf, and you get the polyphenols from the tea. Now you get the whole shebang. So this is sort of like we just stepped up, like getting the health benefits.
Yeah. And that's where you can do those kind of Japanese ceremonies with the whisk and the whole thing.
Sure. I mean, listen, people who are fascinated and really love that, it's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, these ceremonies. But I think tea in today's world has been demystified, and you don't have to. It's not a sacred thing. Enjoy the tea every day. My great uncle, by the way, who lived to 104. I asked him what are the 3 things that he did that like. Look, listen, I was there for his 100th birthday party, and a few days before he turned 100 and had his party, I sat him down and I'm saying, please tell me what are your secrets to longevity? Okay, he wasn't yet 100, and he looked at me. He's like, I don't have like a formula for you. I don't know what there's a secret. But I'll give you 3 things that I think have helped me. Number 1, he said, I don't hold on to anger. I let things roll off my shoulders. Like nothing's that important. All right. I always remember that. Number 2, he said, I drink green tea every day. He lived at the base of a tea mountain in China. And so he would get up in the morning and give his tea, and he'd be sipping his tea all day long, like right within 100 feet or 100 yards from where they were picking the tea. So it was always fresh and everything else. And he knew everything to know there is to know about where they got the tea. And I don't know, he probably drank easily 6 to 10 cups a day because he was sipping it all day long. He didn't sit to chug his tea. He sipped it and just kept on refilling. The third thing he said is his tea. The second thing he said is his tea. The third thing he said is that every morning he'd get up at 4 a.m. and he would walk up a series of a mountain path to get to the tea garden where he would sip his tea with his buddies, his other 90, 100-year-old buddies. Yeah. All right. And he was like, he would be exercising. He'd stay in motion. So think about it. Exercise, diet, good mindset.
Community,
right? Like there's no, that's the secret, I think. And it's not written in stone, but it is the common sense thing that all of us can do. So one of the things is I get deeper and deeper and deeper into my longevity research. What I realize is that the depth of science is awesome. I mean, like we're getting into depths that we have never seen before, like those 4 bacteria thing that I was talking to you about. But at the end of the day, when you pull back far enough, these are readily achievable actions that we can take every day that add up every single year that we live. And, we all want to live as long as we possibly can, but you want to live a good quality of life along the way. And that comes back to, for me, I have to stitch in our humanity into any conversation we have about longevity. Yeah.
Yeah. So important. I want to just hover over tea for one last minute because you mentioned that as the white tea matures to green tea, as the tea plant, it generates more caffeine as a protective mechanism. And there's this whole kind of emerging field of study around, I think, what's called xenohormetins, right? So xenohormetins is what I've heard. It's essentially hormesis as applied to plants. And so, for example, similar to caffeine, for example, like resveratrol in the skins of grapes were a protective mechanism or protective compound that grapes developed to protect itself from fungus.
Yep.
And then
the noble rot.
And then, right. And then, winemakers ended up kind of stressing particular species of grapes more and more for taste purposes. But then, we kind of landed on resveratrol as a potential polyphenol compound that might have some longevity benefits. But I think what is really interesting with this idea of kind of stressed plants is that plants, they don't really have an immune system the way we have an immune system, but they do develop and produce these compounds that are protective. And that when then we eat those or drink those, in the case of the tea, those protective mechanisms are then conferred on us.
Yeah.
And
we get the benefit too.
We get the benefit too. And it just, again, underscores kind of this interrelationship that we have with nature and with plants. And I find it to be just like truly fascinating. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, what's good for the goose and is good for the gander and the human, and the plant world. I think as we have conversations about how to actually do better for our planet, and the whole examination of agriculture and how we approach agriculture, which then goes to what kind of foods we eat and how affordable they are, everything. I mean, I think that this perspective of the interrelationship between the plant world and the human world, and the animal world and the human world as well. I mean, I think it's something that keeps us grounded in terms of what we're doing. It's pretty profound, and I think there's back to this whole theme that we started with in terms of longevity. I mean, it's the totality of all the little steps that we make that get us to our end destination for however many years you want to live. It's not a single magic pill.
Yeah. Well, Dr. William Li, I love being in your presence. I love being the recipient of your enthusiasm and your knowledge. You've helped me understand so many new, interesting concepts, and I can't wait to see what you're cooking up next in this next book. But thanks for being here with me and with us, and I hope you'll come back.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then I think you'll love this one too.